Hello, my name is Dr. Shannon Hill, and I am a board-certified behavior analyst with OBGOBI Learning Solutions. And today I'm going to walk you through the process of entering data that you may have collected on paper forms into a spreadsheet using a program such as Excel. And after we have entered the data, we will then generate a line graph with phase change lines, as this is a very commonly used type of graph in our field. So one of the things that we're going to do is talk about two things: the best way to enter the data to get the graph that you need right now, and then we will come back and we will look at our sheets again and we will embed other data from your sheet so that it is archived for future purposes. As data collection continues, your behavior analyst may realize that they would like to look at the data in a different format or look at comparisons. And so if you go ahead and you enter all of the data from your sheet the first time, it prevents you from having to go back later and pull things out that, retransferring from those original sheets too many times. Okay, so on your screen right now, you'll see that I have an Excel worksheet open, and I have a data sheet that you can see it's on blue paper. So the data that is being shared with you is sample data from interval time sampling, and you might notice a couple of things. First of all, the case number is written in instead of a name. Remember that as many times as possible, if you can replace any confidential information with information that would mean nothing to someone who is a casual observer, that's a good thing to do. So we have a case number on here, and then you will see that each data sheet has opportunity for 4 data collection sessions. They're color-coded, so we have gray, blue, light green, and kind of a more happy green, I guess. In the sheet that you are looking at, you will see that the data, the identified target behavior is listed as crying in all 4 sessions. That's perfectly fine and common. I just want you to be aware that sometimes behavior analysts may use data sheets where they are asking you to collect data on multiple behaviors, and you might have different behaviors on a single sheet. But for our purposes today, all of the data sessions, we're collecting data on the one target behavior, which is crying. Down at the bottom, you will note that we have written in that this is the baseline data sheet. And so we are going to show you, in addition to that, there are 3 other sheets. We have 2 during the intervention phase and 1 during a follow-up phase. So this will just allow you some experience with seeing data entered and graphed across multiple phases. Okay. So the first thing to do when you're looking at your data sheet, we would be starting with the beginning, and we're going to go in to column A. Column A is typically used for whatever data is going to be entered into your x-axis. And as you get more complex data, you will see that it's possible to change that as you go. But for most of the time that you'll be entering data, A will be your timeline, basically. And so if you look at your data sheet, we have all of this data was collected on October the 1st, but at different times of the day. And then when we click through, intervention 1 was on October the 8th, so all of these sessions were October the 8th. Intervention 2 is October the 9th. All 4 of those sessions are October the 9th. And then we had a follow-up session post-intervention on November the 3rd. All 4 of those. So we are going to title column A, row 1 is typically your header rows. We are going to title it Date. Now, when we talk about embedding the data for later purposes, you'll see that it could be that time is important. Right now, we're assuming that your behavior analyst only wants to see by date and phase. That's all they're interested in. But later, I will show you how to embed that time information for later. Okay, so before we start entering our dates, we need to note what phase we're in. So cell 2 of column A is going to say the word baseline. You may want to capitalize it just because that makes that show up a little bit better when you graph it. And then we know that we have 4 sessions on October 1st. One thing that doesn't make a lot of difference when you have a little bit of data like this, but can make a big difference when you have a large amount of data, is a copy function. So we can highlight, once you have entered the date twice, you can highlight the 2 dates and then drag it the number of times you need it to repeat. So we need 4, and there we go. One thing to be aware of, our next session is 2016, October the 8th. If you only have 1 date in and you copy it down, it will progress it forward for you, which is really nice if you are having 1 session per date. We unfortunately are not, so we're going to change that. And we're going to track it down. One thing that I have forgotten to do, we will go back and do. We're going to insert the line right here, because this is where our phase changes and we have intervention. Okay. Intervention extends again on October the 9th. And then we have follow-up. Follow-up in our case is going to be after the behavior intervention plan is transferred to the teacher. And so we went back a few weeks later to see if the gains remained. And that was on 11/1. Okay, so once you have your dates in, the next thing that you want is the data that you want to graph right now. And so column B will be crying. And there are a number of different ways that we can do this. Now, in this interval time sampling chart, we have 10-minute observation periods broken into 10-second increments. So we can either plot this as the raw number of increments in which crying occurred, or we can plot it as a percentage. My recommendation for you, for 2 different reasons, one for today's purposes and one for in general. My recommendation is to plot it as a percentage. The number 1 reason for practice-wise that you would plot this as a percentage is that you may be wanting to share that with teachers, principals, parents, that sort of thing. And percentages are numbers that everyone can relate to, whereas raw data could mean anything. What does it mean that this person cried during 6 intervals? Is that good or bad? Is that a lot or a little? So that's number 1 reason why we would do percentages. And today I really want to show you percentages and how to get your Excel worksheet to do the work for you. The more work you can transfer to the computer program minimizes the error. Not that this is complicated math, but accidents happen. It only takes, a little bit of miscounting in order for your data to be thrown off. So, one thing I will say to you is, actually, as you're doing this, if you have collected your data on paper, you're probably going to not be having it on the screen next to you. You'll have it like I do right now on the desk next to you. I suggest that you pick up some habits early on that will minimize error. And one of those habits would be, as you see all of these X's that are present in this first data collection session, you're going to have to count them no matter what kind of data you enter. So one thing that I suggest is that you grab a highlighter and you mark each one as you've counted it. Silly as it may sound, counting aloud makes a difference as well. Some people I know don't use the highlighter, they use a pencil and they just write in the number 1, 2, 3 so that you can easily see that you've counted everything, and that is a really good idea. So I cannot do that for you right now. We're just going to count aloud together. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 intervals of crying. And so what we will do is we will set this equal to. When you press equal in Excel, in an Excel cell, that tells the program that you're entering a formula, and it will calculate for you. So in this case, we know that she cried for 10 increments, and we know that there are 60 total increments. And once you do that, you get this number. A couple of things that you can do to make this a more manageable looking number, because most of us don't like this many numbers to the right of the decimal. So if you highlight the whole column, right click and format cells, select number, you can tell it how many decimal places you want. We only want 2. You might even choose 0, but 2 is fairly commonly used. Okay. Now, another thing that we can do, we can leave it like this. Mathematically, there is nothing wrong with this. But some people prefer this. Go back into your formula bar, put the 10 divided by 60 into parentheses, choose the asterisk key, which represents multiplication in Excel, and multiply it times 100. And that shows you that in this observation, she cried 16.67% of intervals checked. All right? So let's take the next one. We would count the X's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And we'll go through the same process. Equals, parentheses, 14 divided by 60, close parentheses, times 100. 23.33% of the time on the playground during free play, she cried. When she went to the cafeteria at 12:35, we had 0 observations. 0 is 0 no matter what you do to it, so you can just enter 0. And then in our final observation during worksheet time at the classroom, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we have 15, sorry, I left out the parentheses, 15 divided by 60 times 100. 25%. Okay, so we would continue entering this data along these lines. You can see in our first intervention stage, we have something that looks a lot like an extinction burst. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. Recommend also, just another good habit to have, as you are typing, be sure and look back at your screen in these formulas before you hit enter and make sure that you didn't make any typos. I've been doing this for a long time and I make typos all the time. So observation 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. At lunch, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And then at the end, we obviously have only 3. Okay. Then we will move to intervention day 2. Our data is looking a lot better. Seems like she's gotten the hang of our intervention. On the playground, we have 4 instances. And then at the cafeteria, we have 0. In the classroom, we have 0. Okay, this is a successful intervention, and so we have moved along. We have trained the teacher, and now the teacher is going to take over with ignoring crying and giving increased attention for smiling. And we will come back in about 3 weeks on November the 1st and collect data. And here's what we saw. 0, and then on the playground we have 3 divided by 60. Sorry, see, a mistake. There we go. And then we have 0, and we have 0. Okay. So now we are done with our data sheets for this moment. Actually, we're coming back to them, so I'll leave them up. And I will just drag Excel a little bit for you. Okay. Now, before you make your graph, there's something really important to do, and that has to do with column C. In order to make your phase change lines come in, you have to put something in here that alerts Excel that there's something to draw. Excel is not really set up to do what we as behavior analysts want, and so this is kind of a backdoor method of using something that is there for another purpose. But it works. So column C, we will change. And we are only going to put data on the phase change lines. So row 2, row 7, row 16. The thing to do is to look at the data that you have in column B and choose a number that is larger than the largest number. You don't want it to be a great deal larger because that's going to make your graph unnecessarily tall, but it does need to be larger than the largest number. So when we scan through here, we can see 58.33 is our largest number. So if we select something along the lines of 60, that should work. So we're going to place the number 60, you'll see why in a minute, on the baseline, on the intervention, and on the follow-up. And at this point, we are ready to generate a graph. So we will highlight the data that we are interested in seeing graphed. Excel refers to graphs as charts. So we select the Charts tab. By the way, I am using a Mac. If you're using a PC, your Excel window is going to look just a little bit different, but all of the same headers are there. I think you don't have this nice navigation pane that I do, so all of yours would be up here, and you can still navigate through these menus to find what you need here. So we want a line chart. You have some decisions to make. The types of line charts that we are using here are simple line charts. They're not stacked. They're not 100% stacked. You could select a marked line if you had a lot of data and you wanted to see those values. That's what that does. It writes the values of each data point where you can see it. Don't think we need that because we don't have a lot of data here. I press that button and the graph shows up for me. I can drag it at the corner, make it a little larger so that I can see it better. Okay, so you can see that the lines interrupt here and here and here, and that is because there's no data and crying at these locations. Our 60s are not showing up because they're points. There's a lot of empty space, so there's nothing to connect them to in a line chart. What we are going to do to get those lines to show up is go into chart layout, come over to error bars. Now what we're going to generate is not actually an error bar. This is a backdoor method, as I mentioned earlier. So we don't need any of this. We're going to go instead to error bars options. Where do we want this line, this top to bottom line to be? We don't want it on crying, we want it on phase change. We select OK. Now, here you just have to know what you're looking for. We want our lines to go down, and so we choose the minus. You just simply need to remember that. The picture kind of helps out. You know that we're not going up, we're not going from top to bottom with the middle, we want it to come down. And then on fixed value, whatever number we put, move this, in our phase change column is the number that we need in our fixed value. So we're going to change that from 10 to 60. Okay. So now we have phase change lines. And you can see the separation between baseline, intervention, and follow-up. The rest of this is pretty much just aesthetics. I like having titles. Sorry, I'm in the wrong place. So we can make a title above the chart. Target behavior is typically a nice title. It's nice to have titles on your axes as well. So our horizontal x-axis, especially when it's small font like this, delete what's there. Observation dates. And then we can have a title on our vertical axis. rotated is nice. That way everything's in line. Percent of observations. Well, not observations. Percent of intervals. To me, this is very small and hard to read, so I would probably come in, change the font size. It does have to be highlighted in order to do that. It's a little better. Okay. You probably don't need a legend here. You can delete that. And it spreads out and gives your graph more form. So this is nice. You're able to see that. I would say that whether or not you put a change baseline in the baseline section is up to you. Some people just see the axis line as the phase change line. That's fine. You can go in and format this if you don't like seeing those zeros there. Number. Okay. Oh, because it has link to source checked, you're not able to change it. You can uncheck that and move it to 0. There you go. Okay, so most of the things that you can think of as an I wish it didn't look like this are things that can be changed. You can always click this question mark button and find some help for all of these formatting type things. Okay, so that is your basic line graph with phase change lines. Now let's talk about archiving your data. And create a column for all of the pieces of data that you've actually collected, because you've actually collected more than just whether crying occurred or not. You have other things that may be impacting it, such as your start time, such as your observer's name, location, and activity. Now doing this, going back and including this information, suppose it is a more intensive intervention and you have multiple behaviors that are occurring and you start to notice that your line isn't this pretty anymore. You know, it looks random. Being able to go back and see different variables involved and to break this out by time of day, who is the data collector, where are we, what are we doing, is very possible. And if you already have that information here embedded, you can do it quite quickly. And we will resume in a few minutes with some. I don't want to spend a lot of time with you watching me actually put that data in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go away. I'm going to insert this data for you, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you how to select it to make the graph. Okay, so I have entered the rest of the data there, and you can see that the remaining data that we have this time is all text data, and that's fine. Let's think to the question about follow-up. She was at 0 everywhere except the playground. And so it's possible that the teacher will come and say, and want to talk about that although the rate is not extremely high, that playground crying is still occurring, and wondering if the intervention is working for the playground or not. And so there's a couple of ways to do this. You can do this with filters and it gets a little bit more complex. I would recommend, you take some Excel classes to do all of that. For our purposes today, if you just want a very quick and easy way to see whether or not that is an issue, you can sort on location. Okay, and so this time we sorted, and we're kind of lucky that playground ended up at the top because that makes graphing very easy. But let me make it a little bit more difficult for you to show you a new skill. And now it's sorted at the bottom. A couple of things that you can do here if you just need a temporary graph is you can hide all of these lines that don't apply. Just by clicking on hide, they go away. The problem with that is it does adjust your graphs and it makes them look odd. So I don't recommend doing that unless you just want to do it as a quick screen and see what happened. And then if you find something interesting, go ahead and do it the right way. Let's create a new one just looking at playground time. We don't have a lot of observances here, but it's enough to make a graph. We're only interested in this. And we can generate a quick line graph. Now, it looks odd. And we're going to have to make a few repairs. Okay. And so one of the ways that I recommend you go about making your repairs is through the select data. Okay. So right now, your sheet, your chart data range is indicated. Okay. And we only are interested in Series 1. It's called Series 1 because it doesn't know, because we did not highlight our headers. So we go here, we select this arrow button, and we bring it to our data, and we highlight the thing that we want as our title, crying. And you'll see your series name has now changed to crying. Okay. Our Y values are from B14 to B17. That is correct. Our X values are from A14 to A17, and that is correct. So we can click OK. Format our axis. OK. Change that from automatic to text. Because what it's doing is it's reading that we started at October the 1st and we ended at November the 1st, and it is filling in all of these missing dates. If it thinks it is text rather than a date, that should make that stop. And now we are down to our four data points. So now we are looking at this data. We don't really need that. The question becomes, do we think the intervention is also working on the playground? And when we see this looking like this, the answer is certainly yes. If the teacher disagrees, we may ask her to collect some data of her own so that we can have an increase in the number of observances. Sometimes it is useful to be able to compare across contexts. And in order to do that, a column or bar graph can be more helpful. And so let's just take our baseline data as an example of wanting to know, maybe to drive our intervention planning, we want to know, is one context more important than another? So we would just be looking at our baseline data at this point. Is to ask yourself, what is the important information? We need crying. We don't really need time. We don't need phase change. We don't need start time or observers or activities. For what we are looking at, we are just interested in crying and location. Okay, so we can select a column, clustered column. And we can select our data from scratch. So our chart data range is here, right? Just baseline. We don't need it looking any further. The series that we want are crying and location. We want to change that to crying. Our Y values are here. And then our categories are our locations. And we click OK. And we have a nice bar graph. Based on our bar graph from our baseline, we may think cafeteria is not a place where crying occurs. It may not be a target for our interventions, but the other three areas seem to be appropriate focus. So in summary, when creating graphs using a spreadsheet program such as Excel, make sure that when you're collecting data on paper that you are taking steps to protect client personal information. And when it comes time to actually enter that data into your spreadsheet, take a few minutes to think about what information your graph needs to impart, because that will drive how you set up your data. Check behind yourself for mistakes. We are all human beings. When we start entering data, we are not always looking at the screen. We may be looking at the sheet that is on our desk. So check behind yourself frequently to make sure that you did not enter anything erroneously. Have systems to avoid such things, such as using those copy functions, by using counting methods to make sure that you do not miscount your tally marks or X's. Let the spreadsheet do as much work as it will do for you. So that means instead of calculating in your mind from raw data into a percentage, enter those formulas so that the spreadsheet will do that for you. Remember that there are no phase change lines that you can just easily insert by using format options. You're going to have to use error bars and manipulate them to make the lines that you need to make. And don't forget to embed your other data that you have recorded on those data sheets. Even if you're not using it right now, it may be useful in the future. So embed that in a clean way so that you or your behavior analyst can access it again in the future. This concludes the introduction to entering and graphing data using Excel. This concludes the introduction to entering and graphing data using Excel.